From the heart of South Asia to the crossroads of Central Asia, from the turbulent Middle East and North Africa to the power corridors of the West, where narratives collide, perspectives matter, and stories connect, this is Beyond Borders. I am Omar Khalid, but during the hour that will follow, we'll try to decipher stories that matter to a changing world in a changing scenario and stories that are extremely pertinent in this day and age. We'll begin with what we call region lines or the top lines or the top stories of the day. We start from the Middle East, where Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a Gaza ceasefire that is aimed at ending a war that has killed tens of thousands, has destroyed the Palestinian territory and unleashed a major humanitarian crisis. The first phase of the deal calls for a ceasefire, the release of all hostages, Israeli withdrawal to an agreed point, and the release of some Palestinian prisoners. Moving to the South Asian region, where the Indian opposition has raised serious questions over Bihar's special revision of electoral polls, alleging over 500,000 duplicate names and massive deletions. Now, in a statement, the Congress claims that nearly 3 million voters who were registered in the Lok Sabha 2024 polls are now missing from the list ahead of the upcoming assembly elections. In Islamabad, Pakistan and the IMF have made significant progress towards a staff-level agreement following review talks under the Extended Fund Facility and Resilience and Sustainability Facility. Productive discussions were held on Pakistan's reform agenda to strengthen climate resilience, including the completion of reform measures under the Resilience and Sustainability Facility. Moving on, Hungarian writer Laszlo has won the 2025 Nobel Prize in Literature for his compelling and visionary work. Krasznahorkai is the second Hungarian to win the Nobel Prize in Literature after Imre Kertész in 2002. Finally, U.S. President Donald Trump calls for the arrest of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson for resisting his mass deportation drive. Armed troops from Texas have been deployed in Chicago, sparking outrage and fears of growing authoritarianism and Trump's widening immigration crackdown. Our leading story, of course, belongs to the Middle East and North African region. The peace deal finally taking shape. After more than 2 years, who would have thought that day would finally come? A joy, a sense of relief to all the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are still cramped up in little spaces within Gaza and did not know where things will move. Finally, a sigh of relief for those Muslims and those Palestinians. More in the following report.
After 2 years of relentless bombardment and unimaginable suffering, a glimmer of hope has finally emerged for Gaza. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced what he calls a breakthrough.
I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly.
The first phase of a Gaza ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Qatar, which played a key mediating role, confirmed that both sides have agreed on all provisions and implementation mechanisms, paving the way for an end to the war, Israel's withdrawal, the entry of humanitarian aid, and a long-awaited prisoner exchange. Hamas, in a statement, described it as a deal to end the war on Gaza. And people in Gaza wait anxiously for the ceasefire to take effect and for the guns to finally fall silent. In the past 24 hours alone, at least 10 Palestinians have been killed and 49 injured, bringing the total death toll since October 2023 to over 67,000, with thousands still buried under the rubble. Meanwhile, the world is responding. Palestinians have celebrated on the streets of Khan Yunis. Jubilation spread throughout the city as Palestinians expressed optimism that the prolonged, devastating Israeli genocidal war might finally conclude. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi hailed the deal as a historic moment, while Saudi Arabia welcomed it as a step to alleviate suffering and restore stability. Leaders from France, Germany, and the Arab world are gathering to discuss the day after what Gaza's future will look like once the fighting stops. Pakistan has also welcomed the ceasefire deal. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif called it a historic opportunity for lasting peace in the Middle East. He praised the leadership of U.S. President Donald Trump and the tireless mediation efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey. The question now is, will this ceasefire hold? If this agreement endures, it could mark the first real step toward ending Gaza's long nightmare and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter in Middle East peace.
To discuss more on this very important development, we've been joined by two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. In the studios, we've been joined by Dr. Almas Haider Naqvi. He's a foreign affairs expert. Almas, thank you very much to have joined us. While online, we've been joined by Professor Scott Lucas, who's a political analyst who joins us from the United Kingdom. My first question goes to you, Professor Scott Lucas. UN Chief Antonio Guterres hails this finally the first phase of this ceasefire agreement and its implementation that is going to go forward as a desperately needed breakthrough. Can, in your point of view, this agreement finally shift the narrative from endless conflict that we've been seeing since 2023, but even before 2023, to some kind of credible political process that ensures Palestinian statehood?
It's a start, but there is a long, long way to go. First, we're still negotiating details of the phase one ceasefire, specifically details of which Palestinians will be released from Israeli prisons. For example, the Palestinian national leader, Marwan Barghouti, who has been held for more than 20 years by the Israelis. Hamas wants him released. The Israelis want to continue to detain him. I don't think that will, in the end, stop what will probably be Monday's exchange of hostages for detainees, but it still means that not everything is nailed down, even on this initial phase. And then the really hard work begins on the subsequent phases, because this Donald Trump plan is actually a vague sketch in many areas. You could talk about the timing for Israel's withdrawal and how far back they will pull back in the Gaza Strip. You talk about the timing of Hamas's disarmament, whether their officials can remain in Gaza. It's very vague in terms of this international board led by Trump to oversee Gaza. It has no Palestinians on it. It's very vague, this international stabilization force. In other words, the security personnel. Will Israel allow Palestinians to be part of that force? And it's very vague on the day-to-day administration of Gaza. While the sketch says Palestinians can be on that day-to-day administration, we know that Hamas cannot serve on it. The Israelis have objected to the Palestinian Authority in the short term. So which Palestinians would be allowed to serve? All of that's quite vague. And then, of course, your end point that you've mentioned, which is to get a two-state resolution, which we hope for the security of both Palestinian and Israeli civilians. But who are the main people who object to Palestinian statehood? Well, it's the Netanyahu government and it's Donald Trump.
Well, that is true, but I don't know how things are going to move forward. We'll go to a statement by Netanyahu, which I feel also is ambiguous, to say the least. Nevertheless, I'll come back to what Antonio Guterres said, and he talked about humanitarian assistance that is the need of the day now under the current circumstances. Will the Israelis allow that now that this first phase of the peace deal or agreement between Hamas and Israel is going to move forward? Will the people in Gaza finally be able to get adequate food, water, and health supplies?
Well, the provision in the proposed, first phase of the plan is that you have 400 trucks per day over 5 days going into Gaza, with more to follow. Now, I must emphasize that's less than was going into Gaza before October 2023, when you had 500 to 600 trucks that were going in. So it's only just a start. And you ask a key question, which is, if you recall, we were at this point at the start of 2025. We had a 60-day ceasefire. We had some hostages being released for detainees. We had aid that was going into the Strip. But then at the start of March, the Netanyahu government didn't like the terms, so they refused to move to a phase two of the ceasefire. And that's when they imposed an almost total blockade on aid into the Strip. So that's why I'm saying that, look, I welcome, as the UN Secretary General has done, that we may see some hostages, will see some hostages returning home. We will see relatives finally get closure on the bodies of their loved ones that were held by Hamas. We'll see some detainees that are going back to Gaza. But it's really a process that is only just beginning, and that we have to watch it carefully in the weeks and even the months ahead.
That is going to be something that the whole world will be watching, to be very frank, Professor Lucas, because this is a development that is indeed extremely positive, but you know, there are a lot of question marks and cautious optimism around it. Almas, by urging all the parties to seize this momentous opportunity towards ending the occupation and realizing a two-state solution, is the United Nations, in your point of view, signaling that the world will no longer accept or tolerate temporary truces without some kind of a permanent peace framework?
Yes, I agree this point to an extent, because if you closely monitor or analyze Trump's plan, 20-point plan, I'm critical or a bit skeptical about this plan. The reason is, yes, there are some actions proposed in this plan, and we are looking forward to some developments on those plans. But as far as the concern is the two-state solution is concerned, I haven't seen any concrete roadmap or framework for the establishment of a two-state solution as for now.
But you know, the fact is also that the UN kind of indicates through Antonio Guterres that this is something that we need, but this is something that should be associated with some kind of a permanent peace framework. This is the indication that I kind of read through the lines when I go through Antonio Guterres' statement. Do you feel this is something, you know, that will be withheld or by Israel, or will be accepted by it?
In my understanding, it's in a fragile peace. The reason is it's in the personal plan of the Trump. President Trump has the significant influence on both of the parties, and is trying to manipulate such kind of influence. Otherwise, still there are suspicions about how things move forward. I suspect that after the release of the captives, there might be some hostilities will sustain.
All right. I'll come to you, Professor Scott Lucas, and I have two questions regarding Israel that I'm going to kind of bundle up and ask you. The first regards this statement by Benjamin Netanyahu. He says he's going to convene his government today. I think this is going to happen in the next couple of hours to approve the Gaza ceasefire agreement. He says this is a great day for Israel, quote unquote. The first part of my question is Israel really happy with this deal? The second part concerns the Israeli government spokesperson, Shosh Badrosian, who says that within 24 hours of the cabinet meeting, and this is what she's saying, there will be a ceasefire in Gaza. She says, and I quote, Israel has signed the final draft of the agreement in Egypt this morning. And she also says that following the 24-hour period, a 72-hour time frame will begin for the release of the captives and prisoners. My second part of the question is, can Israel be trusted with this process?
Yeah, I'll put those two together to say that over the next 72 hours, I do think we're going to get the Netanyahu government agreeing to this phase one ceasefire, primarily because it releases pressure on Netanyahu, who has been in significant political and legal trouble, and has tried to use this mass killing to push that back. But it's caused great pressure from the families of the hostages in Israel, who have been a significant force. And he was having trouble holding out against them when they were saying, look, by continuing the military operations in Gaza, indeed by taking it to the point where you were trying to overrun Gaza City, you're threatening the lives of the remaining 20 hostages who are still there, let alone getting recovery of 28 bodies. Those hostage families are celebrating tonight in Israel and saying, yes, we finally have been heard. Our wishes have been met. So that takes the pressure off if you get this hostages for detainees deal. But you're absolutely right, which is, well, where are we after that? And as my colleague in the studio mentioned, this is the difficult part because Netanyahu did not want to cease fire. He really had to do it because of pressure from the Gulf states via Donald Trump. And he has far right ministers who are opposed to even the phase one deal. That is the finance minister, Mr. Smotrich, the internal security minister, Mr. Ben-Gvir. Now they will not bring the government down over this initial phase because they won't risk bringing the government down over the hostages coming back. But as Mr. Smotrich said today, as soon as the hostages are back, we will resume the attempt to destroy Hamas. And of course, if you're trying to destroy Hamas, that is not advancing the ceasefire. That is threatening the resumption of military operations. So how Netanyahu is going to be caught between those ministers and between the Gulf states and Donald Trump, if Trump holds firm to the idea that he not only wants the hostages to go back to Israel, that he actually wants a lasting ceasefire. And that's going to be a huge question because Trump will take a victory lap this weekend, but will he then say, oh, that's it, I've done my bit, and then walk away?
But I'd like to understand, Scott Lucas, the fact is that you can't just walk away after a preliminary or first phase of an agreement that, highlights 20 important points as far as this whole, the parameters of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is concerned. Secondly, I'd also like to understand there is a meeting that is going to happen in Paris. Many important countries are going to take part in it, and it will also happen more or less at the same time that the cabinet meeting of the Israeli government is going to be held. How important is this meeting that is going to happen in Paris? Will the West be able to exert sufficient pressure on Israel so that it continues with the process of the peace plan?
That's an important meeting. And again, let's link those two questions. Look, at the start of March, when Donald Trump got the phase one ceasefire, but then Netanyahu scuppered it. He expanded the military operations. He cut off almost all aid. Trump did walk away. We went for months with the United States effectively giving a blank check to the Israeli attacks. Now, that only stopped really in the start of September when Netanyahu miscalculated. And he not only tried to kill Hamas's negotiators, he did it with airstrikes inside Qatar, a U.S. ally with the largest American air base in the Middle East. And it was at that point that the Gulf states went to the Trump people and said, look, you have got to put pressure on Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire or the whole region is going to be destabilized. So, the point here is that Trump has walked away in the past. And to link it to that meeting, when you had European countries, Arab countries, who have convened to say we need to begin to discuss the details of implementation, to make Trump's sketch into a real plan. That includes the arrangements for governance, the arrangements for aid, the arrangements for security. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio initially said he was going to attend that meeting. But then when the Israelis objected and said, we don't want this meeting to proceed, Rubio pulled out. So I'm still not convinced that the Trump administration is in this to get a lasting settlement. They've gone for this quick initial deal because Trump, let's be honest, his motive is to get a Nobel Peace Prize. And because his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who, by the way, from next week will be working in business alongside Benjamin Netanyahu's former national security advisor, strategic affairs advisor, Ron Dermer, because Kushner, bankrolled by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, wants to show something for his business. In other words, there is a symbolic first step, which is important. But as I said, the really hard work starts next week. Will the Americans stay on board or will they walk away if Netanyahu gets wobbly?
My last question to you, Scott Lucas, concerns the current state of violence that continues despite the announcement of the peace plan and the acceptance by more or less both the sides, because even the Israeli spokesperson has said that he has signed on the dotted line as far as the peace plan is concerned. Why then is violence still continuing in Gaza? Is this a prerequisite of what we should look towards, despite the peace plan, the continuity of violence within Gaza?
I mean, the immediate situation is that when the Israeli representative signed, it was only a provisional signature. It still has to be confirmed by the Israeli cabinet, which is meeting right now, in fact. So I think we do get confirmation of the deal. And I think, I can't guarantee it, but I think that means the Israelis will cease military operations at least over the next 72 hours. Certainly, you know, unless Hamas gives them a reason to attack. But after those 72 hours are up, there are so many places where this can come unstuck. It could come unstuck because the Israelis say Hamas is refusing to disarm. Therefore, we have to resume our attacks. It could come unstuck because Hamas says, we don't like the extent of Israel's withdrawal. Therefore, it falls apart. It could come unstuck because there's no agreement on the security arrangements inside Gaza. And so the Israelis effectively go back to saying we have to establish at least a short-term occupation of the area. So, you know, let's take a breath and at least say that some people will be alive this weekend who might have been killed otherwise. But then let's be aware that the stakes are only higher starting next week.
I agree with you on that. The stakes continue to be extremely high and will be higher once, you know, this whole peace plan comes effect. And as you said, after these 72 hours also, all eyes will be on where all of this will be going. Thank you very much, Professor Scott Lucas, to have joined us all the way from the UK. Till next time. Almas, so many different international leaders talk about this peace plan, whether it be our Prime Minister, our Deputy Prime Minister, who have hailed this as a step in the right direction. So have all the international world leaders. Some of the leaders are a bit cautious in their tone, others are very jubilatory. How is the world taking this, in your point of view? And should we be cautious, as Scott Lucas talks about this, or should we embrace this new step in the right direction?
In my understanding, at the first the point, the word at least encourage and welcome the development. There is any sort of peace initiative should be appreciated. So that Pakistan is as part of that meeting with Trump, and Pakistan along with other Muslim countries at least appreciated any peace plan for to end the casualties in the Gaza. So the word primarily welcome this initiative, they support this initiative, but in my personal understanding, this plan is hardly can be implemented in letter and spirit. The reason for Israel, it contradicts for Netanyahu's internal political regime survival. This is the one. The second, it contradicts with the greater Israeli plan. So for Hamas, if you closely look and analyze this peace plan, it exclude Hamas as a political entity in future. Right. This is the one. And the second, there is no clear framework or plan to establish an independent Palestinian state.
All right. So a lot of questions in your point of view still remain as far as this peace plan, although there's a lot of optimism, jubilation, but the jubilation is there, but there needs to be some kind of a cautious optimism and a lot of pressure on Israel so that this continues in the right direction. We'll be back after a short break. And now let's move on to South Asia. Our leading story as far as South Asia is concerned concerns the upcoming elections in Bihar state in India. These are going to happen in November. That has already been announced. But we all know how India moves when it comes to any kind of elections. Internationally, using the Pakistan card one way or the other, we will see what will happen from the Indian side. Secondly, the internal politics and all the machinations in order to change however and whatsoever direction can be taken in this pretext. Now, what is happening here is that the Congress party has alleged that the BJP is using pre-rigging in these polls. Is this true? To what extent is this true? They have a lot of facts and figures in that respect. And we're going to ask Dr. Almas the same question. What is exactly the whole prerequisite around these elections that are going to happen next month in Bihar, with the Congress alleging that the BJP is involved in massive rigging?
I think in my understanding, in any sort of election process, there are three phases. The first phase is the pre-election, the poll day, and the post-election. Legitimacy and credibility of all these processes are so much important to establish a fair election. So at the pre-election stage, what I see that the Election Commission of India has gone through a process of special intensive revision, SIR. And you know, the Congress party has raised so much question about the credibility of such process, because you know, in that list there are reports that more than 5 lakh duplicate voter has been registered. So there are lots of facts and figures, and on those figures and facts, the Congress party is raising questions. So it is a very crucial that legitimacy of the election next month. So and this is not the first time in history. The previous elections, all Congress party and other opposition party raised the question about the fairness of the elections. So this time, once again, I see that the BJP party is trying to manipulate the elections before the time, and this is the phase in which you can manage your preferred voters and then manage before the poll day.
Now, finally, seeing this whole pressure, in your point of view, will the Indian Election Commission turn a blind eye to these fake lists, to the ghost voters, to the fake addresses, and even names of the deceased that are present in these lists to create space for rigging? Will they be allowed that under the pressure that the Congress is creating?
No, look, Election Commission of India tries to answer the questions, but those questions are not satisfactory for the political actors in India. So the satisfaction is so important for the legitimacy and you know, fairness of the elections.
All right, all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Almas Haider Naqvi, to have joined us in the studio to talk about Gaza as well as this rigging process that has already begun in Bihar. And we don't know what the next couple of weeks have in store as far as India and Bihar are concerned, but we should expect the negative kind of fireworks as far as all that process is concerned. Thank you very much, Almas, to have joined us. Let's take you to the second story regarding South Asia, and that concerns the relationship between Pakistan and the IMF. Now, the IMF mission and the Pakistani authorities have made significant progress as far as reaching a staff-level agreement, or the SLA, on the second review under the 37th month extended arrangement under the EFF is concerned, and on the first review of the 28-month arrangement under the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, otherwise known as the RSF. Now, the program implementation remains strong. It is broadly aligned with the authorities' commitment. Significant progress has also been made in the discussions in several areas as well. There was a huge press release that was taken out by the IMF office that detailed all that has happened within this whole visit of the IMF team to Pakistan, what has transpired, what has been decided, what hasn't been decided. The fact is also that both the sides are now moving swiftly towards a staff deal. A lot of progress has been made, and this is officially has been said by the IMF side. This is extremely important in this whole context of economic progress that Pakistan wants to make in different arenas and the structural reforms that Pakistan also wants to implement and in line with the IMF requirements. Now, to discuss more on that, we've been joined by Sultan Ali Haider. He's a political economist and right here with us in the studio. Sultan, thank you very much to have joined us. You are here with our first show in the news set. So welcome to Beyond Borders. How do you assess the significant progress that has been achieved during the visit of the IMF mission to Pakistan, particularly as Pakistan moves closer towards the staff level agreement as well as the RSF framework agreement as well?
It is less than perfect. Let's start with that, right? Less than perfect. Perfect score would have been if we had made the agreements made here, right? So naturally, the news is that Finance Minister and the team they are traveling next week, or perhaps over the weekend.
Okay.
And next week they'll be spending time, but that was raising some question marks because then the concern is how big is the gap. So that is where the significant, and IMF saying that the significant progress has been made. That means there's some
I think there is a lot of subtext in it as well, but the fact is that they lay down this in black and white to shut down all detractors who are trying to say otherwise.
Exactly. So in that context, significant progress is significant progress, right?
Yes.
So a lot has been discussed, and in terms of progress, you see all of the indicators, they are really, really good, right? So, and I believe that usually IMF programs over decades, they have been considered as not being successful. Let's not use the word failure, but they have been less than successful, and that is why we would need another program. This time around, most of the conditionalities, they are being met with very, very good discipline, and they're also yielding results. For example, inflation is way down. So we had seen earlier closer to when this whole program started, right? So, or before the program, close to 35–40%. Now we just saw like 0.8% inflation in an environment where interest rates have also been cut down by 11%. There was a lot of concern amongst economists that this is too sharp of a drop by the finance minister, but still despite that, so it's a very nice environment. On top of it, we are also seeing our fiscal surplus, right? So that shows very, very good financial discipline.
You talk about fiscal surplus. The IMF acknowledges in its statement that the program implementation remains strong, quote unquote, and is aligned with Pakistan's commitments. What does this, in your point of view, signal as far as the government's fiscal discipline? Because you were talking about the fiscal progress that Pakistan has made. So let's talk about the fiscal discipline. What does this statement talk about fiscal discipline as far as reform credibility?
Fiscal discipline, because usually what would happen would be that governments would go in and they would agree on very ambitious plans, right? So they would say that we will collect lots of revenue and our spending will be really, really curtailed, right? But when the implementation side would come, so then our spending would be really in excess of what we had planned or budgeted. At the same time, revenue would not be coming in. And to fill that gap, we would be scrambling around the world and locally also going to our own debt markets to raise debt to fill that gap. And IMF would have to come in, right? So this time around, they gave us a lot of detailed targets. It was very, very prescriptive, which usually is not good, but perhaps the patient needed that, right? So the doctor is happy that the patient has been adhering to the advice and taking the medicine, and now it is yielding results in very simple layman terms.
All right, you know, you need to be a doctor maybe one of these days, Sultan.
You are a medicine doctor, I know that.
Let's not go there. Pakistan's efforts towards fiscal consolidation, Sultan, and prudent monetary policy, how in your point of view have they helped stabilize the economy while continue to support, for example, issues such as flood recovery and social protection needs?
You see, because we had this surplus, we had this resilience, that is why we have been facing devastating floods, right? Everyone knows and understands it has been quite shocking for Pakistan's economy and large part of our population and factors of production. However, because we have this, because otherwise you would have seen dollars to Pakistan rupee to dollar rate shooting up, way up, right? are scrambling for more funds immediately, right? So we have not seen government of Pakistan rushing to, we see our Prime Minister visiting different capitals, right? But it's not that we are going and saying that please give us some funds and our local population is devastated. That is because we have this fiscal space to take care of it. And one of the requirements of IMF also is, in terms of this review, it has been that each of the provinces, they have to have their own surpluses, right? And they're supposed to take care of this flood related issues from that surplus, and on top of that still give certain surplus. So one of the points of discussion with the IMF, government of Pakistan was saying that I think to the tune of 750 billion losses have been recorded on the account of floods, right? So government has been asking that, one, that is going to create a gap from the targets. On top of it, our revenue collection would also come down, right? One is you have to bridge this gap, right, in terms of development. The other is revenue shortfall will also take place. So that is where the government has been discussing, and IMF has been sympathetic, and they have also mentioned that in their statements.
All right. Of course, they have. They have also mentioned about Pakistan's structural reforms in governance, transparency. They've talked about the business environment and how all of these have advanced. And that's very important for the IMF to officially acknowledge that. How are these reforms that we have already discussed in previous shows, Sultan, reshaping investor confidence as well as long-term economic sustainability in our country?
So I would say in terms of bottom line, IMF saying that and acknowledging that in terms of reviewing all of these deeply, that's in itself says a lot, right? Right, in terms of news items, we do get these headlines. We do, personally, there is not a lot of public information available, right? But we do know that they wanted transparency in terms of accounting, right? That how much are the revenue leakages happening, and where are the different gaps? For example, there has been a lot of issue in terms of circular debt. So to account for the circular debt and how we are managing that. So the initiative has been taken by the finance minister, and him being a banker also, right? So he has taken a lot of steps in terms of raising debt locally to address that in a big way, right? Similarly, in terms of recording of their losses of state-owned enterprises and the power sector. So a lot of reforms in terms of the billing for utilities, right? So smart metering and all of that. So a lot of steps have been taken. So IMF is acknowledging that, which is a
all right. IMF is also acknowledging the energy reforms. It is also acknowledging Pakistan's reform agenda under the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, and it is also expressing strong confidence in Pakistan's reform trajectory and partnership. Thank you very much, Sultan, to have been so patient throughout the show and to have been on our side as far as the business side of the show is concerned, because we always need a strong anchor when it comes to such stories. Thank you very much. Please stay with us while we end the show. Last two stories very quickly, but they concern the West. So let's take you there. Now, let's begin with the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize in Literature has been awarded to Laszlo Krasznahorkai, who is considered by many as Hungary's most important living author, whose works explore themes of a postmodern dystopia and melancholy. The Swedish Academy honored him for his compelling and visionary oeuvre that, in the midst of apocalyptic terror, reaffirms the power of art. It's very important to continue healing through art in these times as well. Finally, Donald Trump has called for Illinois governor to be jailed over migration issues. Now, he has escalated his confrontation with Democratic leaders by calling for the arrest of the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. He has accused both of them of obstructing his mass deportation campaign. The demand has followed the arrival of 200 Texas National Guard troops in Illinois to assist the federal immigration agents amid the protests against ICE raids raids in democratic-led cities. Let's hope that things calm down in the next couple of days as far as this is concerned. This, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of Beyond Borders. It's been an exciting ride this week as well. I brought you so many important, interesting stories from across the world and, of course, from Pakistan as well. We'll continue to bring them as the weeks unfold and continue to explore a world without borders and boundaries. So stay tuned right here for the 8 p.m. slot on Pakistan TV. Allah Hafiz.